All right. Ready to dive into a career path that's pretty global, pretty impactful.
Let's do it.
We're talking about the Secretary of State. It's a role that puts you right at the center of international affairs. And today, we're going to use some insights from RoleCatcher to help you prep for those, well, those tough interview questions.
It's a high-stakes role, no doubt. And the interview process, it really tests your understanding of diplomacy, leadership, the whole landscape of global politics. It's not just about knowing the facts, right?
Right. So RoleCatcher, they've got this awesome database of interview questions. They've identified the top 10 that tend to pop up for aspiring secretaries of state. Let's unpack them. What are the interviewers really looking for?
Because acing this interview, it's more than just, rattling off facts and figures. It's about showing you can think strategically, navigate those diplomatic waters, and that you're passionate about making a real difference.
Absolutely. Okay, so question number one. Often it's something like, what inspired you to pursue a career in politics and become Secretary of State? Seems pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah.
But what's the underlying? What are they really getting at?
They're looking for that spark. What truly drives you? It's not just about checking off the boxes, degrees, experience. It's about that deep-seated desire to serve in such a demanding role.
Right, it's got to be more than just, oh, it seemed like a good career move.
Exactly. Think back to a moment, a defining moment maybe, that solidified this ambition. Was it seeing the impact of foreign policy firsthand, a specific historical event? Sharing that story and making it relatable, that's key.
So connect those personal experiences to the bigger picture of the role itself. Now imagine they follow up with, can you tell us about a specific experience that showcases your leadership in a complex international setting? How do you approach that?
This is where you really flex those diplomacy muscles. Have you navigated cultural differences? Built consensus? What about dealing with unexpected crises in a global setting? Having those specific examples ready to go, that's huge.
So instead of just saying, I'm a great team player, you'd actually describe a time you helped resolve a conflict maybe, or negotiated a really complex agreement.
Precisely. Paint that picture for them. Don't just tell them, show them.
Okay, question two. This one often comes up. How do you stay up to date on current events and global affairs? We all read the news, right? But what elevates a response here? What are they looking for?
Going beyond those headlines is key. Instead of just, the daily news, mention a diverse range of credible sources. Think international news outlets, academic journals, respected think tanks. That shows you're dedicated to understanding different perspectives, forming your own informed views.
You're not just informed, you're actively engaged. They might even ask, can you think of a recent foreign policy challenge that you felt was misrepresented in the media, and why? Talk about thinking on your feet, right?
Right. They're testing you. They want to see that you can analyze information critically, form those independent judgments. And this is where, if you're using RoleCatcher, that AI feedback can be super helpful. It pushes you to be specific, to really demonstrate that grasp of media analysis.
Now, this next one feels huge EE. What do you believe are the most pressing issues facing the global community today? Why do you even begin to answer that?
It's about demonstrating that big picture thinking, but tailoring it to the specific Secretary of State position, of course.
Oh, that makes sense.
So, research the department's focus. Look into the current administration's foreign policy agenda and try to align your response with that.
So if climate change diplomacy is a big focus for them, for instance, you'd highlight that.
Exactly.
And this is where RoleCatcher's AI can be a game changer.
Absolutely. It can help you tailor your answers, make sure they're relevant.
Okay. Question 4 gets a bit more personal. What experience do you have working with foreign governments or international organizations? What are they really trying to gauge here?
This is all about those diplomatic skills in action. Have you had to navigate cultural differences? What about building consensus among diverse stakeholders? Maybe you've even had to deal with, unexpected crises in an international setting. Specific examples are key here.
Right. Instead of just saying, oh, I'm a people person, you'd actually describe a specific instance where you had to, say, bridge a divide or achieve a tangible outcome in a complex negotiation.
Exactly. Painting that picture, it's so important.
Okay, this next question feels like it's really at the core of being Secretary of State. What do you believe should be the role of the United States in the global community? This feels less about your specific experiences and more about your overall worldview. Right.
Absolutely. This is where you articulate your vision. What does America's place in the world look like to you? And how does that align with the specific Secretary of State position? Have they emphasized multilateralism, for example, or strategic alliances in a particular region? Show them you've done your homework.
It's about demonstrating that you're not just a policy expert, but a strategic thinker who understands global leadership. Now, I bet they might throw in a curveball here, something like, how would you reconcile your personal views on, say, a particular issue with the administration's current stance? Talk about a high-pressure moment, right?
It's about navigating those potentially choppy waters with, with grace and diplomacy. Remember, you can acknowledge the complexity of the situation while still demonstrating that you can uphold and represent the administration's position.
It's a fine line to walk, for sure. Now let's dig into question 6. This one dives into the nitty-gritty. How would you approach negotiating a complex international agreement with multiple stakeholders and competing interests? It feels like the ultimate test of diplomacy in action. What makes an answer stand out here?
It's about showcasing your strategic thinking, your proven ability to navigate those complex negotiations. And again, don't just tell them, show them. Did you use a specific negotiation framework? Did you factor in cultural nuances in your approach? Maybe you faced unexpected roadblocks that you had to overcome. Those details are what make your answer memorable.
It's about proving you can handle the heat, right? And speaking of which, question 7 often addresses a very sensitive topic. How would you approach addressing human rights violations and promoting democracy in countries with authoritarian regimes? This one requires deep understanding of both diplomacy and ethics, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. This is where your knowledge of international law, successful advocacy, diplomatic solutions, it all comes into play. You want to show that you understand those levers of influence, the potential consequences of different approaches, and the importance of balancing those competing priorities.
It's a complex landscape to navigate, for sure.
Yeah, and it's not always clear-cut. They might even ask you, can you give an example of a time you had to grapple with a really difficult decision regarding human rights? And how did you navigate, those ethical and diplomatic implications?
Wow. That's where your judgment, your ability to make tough calls while staying true to those core values, it really comes into play.
Absolutely.
Speaking of tough calls, question 8 often focuses on another critical aspect of leadership. Something like, how do you prioritize competing interests and stakeholders when you're making decisions that impact foreign policy?
It's like juggling, right? A million different things at once.
It really is. Domestic interests, international alliances, economic factors, humanitarian concerns. A successful Secretary of State has to weigh all of those, understand those nuances, and make those incredibly tough calls.
And that's where, I imagine, strategic thinking becomes essential. It's not just about reacting to a crisis, it's about thinking ahead, anticipating those challenges, and really understanding the long-term implications of the decisions you make. Exactly. And this is another area where RoleCatcher, it can be super helpful. That AI, it can analyze your answers to these really complex questions and maybe flag any blind spots in your thinking. Or, maybe areas where you could strengthen your argument.
Well, that's interesting. So you're not just getting feedback on what you say, but how you think through those really multifaceted issues. That's pretty amazing.
It can be a game changer.
Okay, moving on. Question 9. What do you believe are the most important qualities for a successful Secretary of State? What are some of those must-haves, those essential traits that come to mind?
Well, beyond the obvious, deep policy expertise, a real knack for diplomacy, there are some less tangible things that are critical in this role. Resilience, for one.
Resilience. That's interesting.
Oh, absolutely. As Secretary of State, they face constant pressure. There are setbacks, unexpected crises, you name it. Being able to bounce back, learn from those challenges, keep moving forward, that's essential.
Makes sense. You need that inner strength.
Yep.
What else?
Yep.
What other qualities are crucial in your mind?
A strong moral compass. You can't underestimate that because in this role, you're often navigating situations that are ethically complex. You've got the interests of different nations, different cultures, ideologies, even all kind of colliding. And a successful Secretary of State, they need to be a principled advocate for human rights, for democratic values, even when it's really, really tough.
It's about having the courage to do what's right, even when it's not the easy choice.
Exactly.
Now, this next question, this one feels particularly relevant in today's world. How do you approach building strong relationships with foreign leaders and diplomats?
Yeah.
I mean, we're all interconnected now more than ever, so how do you see that?
It's about recognizing that diplomacy at its heart is about building those bridges. Fostering understanding, finding that common ground, even when there are disagreements, and there will be.
Right, there always are.
Active listening is huge, and so is cultural sensitivity, having that genuine appreciation for different perspectives.
So it's not just about, formal negotiations and treaties. It's about those personal connections, those relationships.
Absolutely. Every interaction is a chance to build trust.
It's fascinating to think about how much those dynamics, those interpersonal dynamics, how much they actually influence things on the global stage.
It's huge. And the thing is, these skills, they're not just something you're born with. They can be learned, they can be practiced. RoleCatcher, they even have modules specifically on diplomatic protocol and cross-cultural communication.
Wow. It's like they've thought of everything. They're not just prepping you for the interview. They're really giving you the tools to thrive in this role.
Exactly. And that's really at the heart of what we're doing here, right? It's not just about acing a single interview. It's about giving you those insights, those tools to succeed in what is arguably one of the most challenging and rewarding careers out there.
Absolutely. Now, we've covered those 10 common interview questions for the Secretary of State, but before we wrap things up, let's shift gears a little bit. RoleCatcher has this incredible collection of resources, and I was blown away. Over 3,000 career guides.
It's incredible.
It's amazing. So let's talk about their Secretary of State career guide specifically. What are some of the key takeaways our listeners should know about?
Oh, it's a gold mine of information. It covers everything from different paths into the career because it's not always, a straight line from law school or the Foreign Service. And it also talks about the day-to-day realities of the job.
So it's not just about, like, the glamorous stuff.
No, not at all. It's about the state dinners, the global summits, but it's also about the behind-the-scenes work, the late nights, the really, really tough decisions.
The weight of the world on your shoulders sometimes.
Sometimes, literally. The guide really emphasizes that a successful Secretary of State has to be a master of multitasking. They have to be a skilled negotiator, a strategic thinker, an effective communicator, and all while, navigating the complexities of international politics and upholding the values of their nation.
It's a tall order, that's for sure. But it's clearly a rewarding one for those who are passionate about, making a difference in the world. What else stood out to you from the guide?
One thing that I found really insightful was the focus on building a strong team. A Secretary of State, they rely heavily on their advisors, their staff, the diplomatic corps. And the guide stresses how important it is to surround yourself with talented individuals who, complement your skills and share your vision.
Right, you can't do it all alone. You need a team that you trust, a team that's going to, challenge your assumptions, bring different perspectives to the table.
Exactly. And the guide also highlights how crucial continuous learning is in this role. The world of international affairs, it's constantly evolving. A successful Secretary of State, they need to be a voracious reader, a keen observer of global trends, always willing to expand their knowledge and understanding of these really complex issues.
So it's not a job for someone who's like, okay, I learned everything, I'm good.
No, not at all.
You need that intellectual curiosity, that drive to keep learning, to keep growing.
Absolutely. Now, we've been talking about the big picture, the skills, the knowledge you need to be Secretary of State, but let's not forget about the interview itself. It's just as much about, letting your personality shine through as it is about your qualifications.
That's a good point. You want to come across as authentic, passionate, excited about the opportunity.
Exactly. Let that personality shine through. Share your passion for diplomacy, your commitment to public service, your vision for a better world. Don't be afraid to let that come through.
And this is another area where RoleCatcher's AI, I think, can be really valuable.
Oh, for sure.
It can help you find that balance between showcasing your expertise and letting your personality come through. Can analyze your responses, give you feedback on your tone, your delivery, even things like body language. It's like having a personal branding expert, in your back pocket, helping you put your best foot forward.
Exactly. And honestly, don't underestimate just how valuable it is to practice your answers. I know it can feel a little weird, talking to yourself, but the more you rehearse, the more confident you'll be, and it'll show.
It's like anything else, right? Practice makes perfect. Or at least it gets you a lot closer to acing that interview.
Exactly. And remember, the interview process, it's a two-way street.
Oh, that's a good point.
It's a chance for you to learn more about the role, the department, really understand the administration's foreign policy priorities.
So it's not just about them evaluating you. It's about you figuring out, is this the right fit? Does this align with my skills, my experience, my own vision?
Precisely. And don't be afraid to ask some, thoughtful questions yourself, ones that demonstrate your understanding of the challenges, the opportunities, everything the State Department is facing.
Show them you're not just there for a job. You're there to make a real impact.
Exactly. Now, before we wrap up this deep dive, we've talked about the skills, the knowledge, the strategies, all of it. But what's that one thing, that one intangible quality that really makes a candidate stand out, makes them unforgettable?
That's a great question. What do you think?
Passion. It's about that genuine, heartfelt passion for diplomacy, for serving the public, for making a positive difference in the world.
Yeah, it's that spark. When you're talking about these issues or the challenges you want to tackle, the world you want to help create, it comes through.
Exactly, because ultimately it's that passion, that unwavering belief in the power of diplomacy, that's what really resonates and leaves a mark.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And, it's not every day we get to have these conversations about shaping global affairs.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
But that's the beauty of a good deep dive, right? We get to explore these incredible career paths, expand our horizons a little bit. Who knows? Maybe even inspire a few future secretaries of state out there.
You got it.
To all our listeners who are ready to, take on the world, we're rooting for you. And remember, RoleCatcher has your back every step of the way. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.